Oh, nice.
Oh, my gosh.
The statue of Elizabeth Thorn, who is the caretaker of the cemetery. Her and her husband were appointed caretakers. They were paid $20 a month and allowed to live in the gatehouse, which the front section of it there with the more faded brick is the new, or excuse me, the section that was here at the time of the battle. A lot of this was added to the structure. There are pictures of the gatehouse online that were taken sometime after the battle with significant damage, with the windows blown out. But Elizabeth and her children and her husband lived on one side, and Elizabeth's immigrant parents lived on the other side of the gatehouse. And her parents did not speak a word of English, and her husband Peter was off fighting in the war away from Gettysburg. And she was 6 months pregnant at the time of the battle, and her 65-year-old father buried some 90, they're estimating around 90 bodies that lay all around the cemetery grounds. Not to mention dead horses. This was in the heat of July while 6 months pregnant. The stench was just undescribable, and many people attested to that in their writings after the war. In fact, most citizens would walk around town with either pennyroyal, a bottle of pennyroyal, or peppermint oil, and a handkerchief that they would hold to their nose because the stench was so terrible. Many of the horses were gathered up and put in large piles and burned, which probably smelled just as bad or even worse, but at least they did get rid of the rotting flesh. Elizabeth was never in quite the same health after that ordeal. The child that she carried at the time she bore, and her name was Rose Gordon Meade, named after General Meade, the Army of the Potomac head commander. And she was a very sickly child, and I believe she died at the age of 13. Her husband Peter would return from action alive and in relatively good health, and they would continue to live here and be the caretakers of the cemetery. This is the placard that was dedicated to Elizabeth. I think I've got this close enough where you can read it. And this one right next to it is dedicated to all the women who served in Gettysburg. Many would suffer ill health after working on the wounded with the various chemicals. Many would help with amputations, exposing them to chloroform, possibly sometimes ether, not to mention all the terrible stuff that they used to try to cure illnesses, many containing mercury, strychnine, or arsenic. And I'm sure many died of poisonings that slowly crept up on them over the years. I learned something interesting today about embalming. Embalming was invented in 1860, but they didn't use formaldehyde until 1868. So any bodies embalmed here were used with, it was some type of a chlorite with mercury in it. And there is a story of a young lady whose name was Julia Culp, and she was 23 and died in 1867. She helped with amputations and the surgeries, as well as helping to embalm dead soldiers. And they said she was never in good health after Gettysburg. She married, I believe, in 1865, 2 years after the battle, moved to New Jersey with her husband, and died 2 years later. And her death certificate reads, effects from embalming fluid. So she was basically poisoned by the mercury of the embalming fluid. But the women deserve a great spot here for what they did. Many of the men were off to fight in the war, and they had to raise children plus try to fight through this terrible, maddening event that definitely turned their lives upside down.